All right, it's Wednesday night, and I screwed up. I forgot it was Professor P's off week, so I made the picture without or with Professor P. But I got Andy Wood in here tonight, so
What is going on?
and I like your background; it looks pretty badass.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's go through the list of folks that are in here, and we'll get this thing started properly. Lars from LP94 is here. Michael Schmidt, Mr. John Wilburn, mostly old parts, and Russ Patrick, Miss Cat G, Danny Boyd, Fab Race Mod Repeat from Northeast Dragway, Buick Smith, Buff Del Campo. Let's see, Mopars, Mustangs, and Minivans, Blue Grit Garage, Aunt D, Colleen Tebow. Well, thanks for stopping by. It's another Wednesday night edition of Tech Talk Live, and hopefully Andy and I can, enlighten you on the things that might be your plight in life right now, automotive like. I don't need any more life problems to just take the automotive stuff. So, what have you been up to, Andy?
Oh man, not much. This past weekend went up and seen Mr. Cope. Got the Caspermatic transmission. It is now in Mount Holly, North Carolina. So that's why I have this picture up.
You're going to recreate this, except for really wax the Fairmont wagon, or is that the
LTD I've done waxed it one time.
Oh, you've already beat that one, huh?
Yeah, actually, in the picture of that pass, I actually beat him.
All right. Well, isn't that thing like
I got lucky?
Weren't you guys just racing that car recently?
Yeah,
at an event. Yeah. Okay.
We've been racing it about every weekend. Won us a little grudge race a couple weeks ago. That was fun. Yeah. So good times.
Yeah, and it's got a modular in it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And you guys, are you using a stock Ford computer in that, or is that got a Holley EFI setup?
It's carbureted with a
distributor. Is it really? A carburetor with a distributor on it, huh? Oh, okay, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I put a distributor in the driver's side valve cover. I took a 351 Cleveland distributor, cut it down. Oh yeah. Welded a bung and it dry. There is a 17 millimeter socket on the end of that distributor driven off the cam bolt. 18 millimeter. I'm sorry.
All right, that's pretty ingenious. Is that the normal way how you carburate one?
Well, normally MSD they have a Mod 6 box, box that will control it. But we learned very early that a lot of nitrous with 14-to-1 compression will kill the coil drivers in those boxes.
Oh.
Yeah.
I could see that. I mean, MSDs are famous for, hey, I work and then I don't.
Yeah, it's fun until it's not.
Right.
And it cost us 3 races. I mean, it was bad.
Huh.
One of them was pinks all out.
Oh, really? So you missed out. You got selected for pinks and then missed out on the event?
We were actually at ZMAX in Charlotte, and the box went out. It got so bad, I called my guy at MSD. He said, the MSD trailer's there. He said, go take the box off of the display. And so that's exactly what I did.
Oh, sweet.
And yeah, still cost us a race though.
That's too bad. I'm sorry. Let's see. John Wilburn sent a super chat. Said just felt like ringing the super chat bell early. So hey, thanks, John. 311.
311. Any coincidence? I think not.
No. Okay. The James and James show has popped in. I haven't seen these guys in a while. What's up, everyone?
Where have they been hiding at?
Probably the same place that everybody else, when they disappear, hides at. They have life kicking them in the junk.
Shows up on its own terms.
Right. Let's see here. Levi's Backyard Performance is here. Schweers and Gears. What's up, guys? I'm chilling in the hospital with my wife and new baby daughter. Well, hey, congratulations. She was just
Congratulations.
born
That's
last night. Yeah, congratulations. That's a big deal.
huge deal.
Let's see. John Wilburn says, "Hi, I took that picture, ran a 689 on that pass."
Yeah, sure did.
All right, and we got Dakota's timeout just popped in. So I haven't seen any questions yet for tonight's tech talk, but I'm sure they're coming. Um, let's see. Colleen says that she just finished watching Cope's video 30 minutes ago. Thumbs up, Casper. So I saw he had put your face in the middle of the Casper-matic picture with a bunch of green spider webs on it.
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah.
I got there and there was so many spider webs. You know, the green web. It was crazy. But it was really cool actually getting to go to the birthplace of the Casper-matic. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and you said there's quite a few folks using them now, right? So,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
If I'm
Hopefully,
not
it's a good
mistaken.
runner for Cope.
Huh?
Hopefully, it's a good runner for Cope. Now he gets quite a few orders for him.
Well, the thing about it is he has the corner on the market right now.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And all he has to do is build a good product and keep building a good product, and it's probably going to stay the top of the market.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, I've been I've been busy. I've been let's see, Buick 300ing, then Buick 350ing, and then let's see. I helped the Daddy's Money Garage guys break in their 454, which is, gosh, that thing's pretty healthy.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's like, I think 470 cubes, 10-to-1 compression. It's got cast iron heads on it, but it's got the rectangular port cast iron heads. That thing's probably going to make, I bet it'd be close to 550, 600 horse.
Yeah.
And it'd be relatively easy street driver because it didn't have a lot of camshaft in it.
What heads are on it?
I don't know. This is, I guess it was a marine application engine.
Okay.
But, yeah. Let's see. Okay. Hold on. There's one jumped right by me. Dakota's timeout says that 400 small block Chevy that Andy Dino tested, the Edelbrock VRS, made something around 20 horsepower over the Q-Jet. Do y'all think that's just a choke tower on the Q-Jet? No. The Q-Jet is, I don't know, how big was that VRS that you tested on there?
750.
Okay. Well, the Quadrajet, it depended on which one he had. They're on either
800.
It was an 800, so it's the
Yeah.
75 and later model.
Yeah.
The Q-Jet does not do well with big camshaft generally because it requires that it's actually very much like a Carter AFB or the Edelbrock carburetor, where it's got power pistons in there. That's based on, essentially, that's how it adds fuel with metering rod. Is that power piston? That power piston has to work off of vacuum.
Oh yeah.
Quadrajet is a very vacuum-centric carburetor, and if you got an engine that doesn't pull a lot of vacuum at idle, it makes it very difficult for it to meter fuel properly. And what'll happen is, once it's, like, say, fat right off the hit, it can't clean it up not too easily all the way up, so it stays fat throughout the whole run. Or vice versa. If it's lean off the hit, it's always chasing, playing catch up, trying to fatten it up.
Yeah.
It's never really good in a racing application. But
that is one of the reasons why we decided to go very, very mild on the camshaft in that car.
So he could use a Quadrajet.
Yeah. I mean, if you listen to the video where I just posted where we drove it, man, the idle on it's almost smooth. It pulls like 16, 17 inches of
that's good. Yeah, the more vacuum it makes, the better the Quadrajet works.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, but I think it probably has a lot to do with just engineering in general with that VRS. You're looking at something that's literally, 45 years after
the
last Quadrajet was made?
Well, you're comparing an apple to a watermelon. I mean, it's not even remotely close. And for me, I know how well the VRS did, but I was really impressed about how close the Quadrajet came to it. You know
Oh,
what I'm saying?
yeah.
Especially in the torque department. Torque department was only like 7 pound-feet off.
Well, if you're using an 800 CFM one, there's actually another circuit in there that's tunable, and I don't know if he has the plug knocked out where he can adjust the
Yeah,
adjustable part throttle on there, and that
yeah.
can probably dial it in. I would have to say the later Quadrajet, the 75 and later Quadrajet, is probably closer to the VRS than most carburetors because it actually has what makes the VRS awesome is that it has 4 circuits in it, right? And they
Mhm.
all crosstalk. Now, the
Absolutely.
Quadrajet has 4 circuits. That 75 and later has 4 circuits. They're not cross-talking. You have to tune them all in to work with your combination. And I'll tell you what, Andy could have probably found the extra 20 horsepower if he just
Oh, yeah,
played with the Quadrajet.
if we would have had, metering rods, because it was a little bit on the rich side. I mean, it was like 12.1, 12.2. I know that we probably could have got about 7 or 8 of that back. You know what I'm saying? Pretty
Oh
easy.
yeah, yeah.
So,
And then was it rich all the way through the run once it started?
oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's what they're notorious for is that it's hard to get. The curve is usually pretty good. It's just hard to nail the right curve because the Quadrajet is freaking extensively complicated compared to that VRS.
Yeah.
It's that's why people
But I will
that's why
say
people
this,
hated them.
driving the car on the street, that car drives just as good, if not better, than any late model car that you would find.
Oh, that's awesome.
I
What were you
mean,
guys using the QJet or were you using the
yeah,
VRS?
it's got the QJet on it.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
why yeah,
that's what I was actually going to bring up. Like in real world testing, like driving and drivability, I think
yes.
that thing's going to walk all over that VRS.
Well, having in very small primaries, man, that's where
Yeah.
low speed operations
Well,
gets its guts.
there's a lot of good factors in that. One, you're only tuning 250 CFM,
Yeah,
right? The other thing is velocity through those venturis is
so good.
super high, right?
Yes.
It can meter fuel really well with that high port velocity.
And
And
it,
but
it atomizes the fuel the way that it needs to be done.
right, yep, that's what makes the Quadrajet so versatile. It actually came on V6s all the way up to the biggest big blocks,
Yeah.
and virtually they're the same carburetor. Just changed jets and metering rods and the spring and the power piston. So let's see here. Who else we got? Let's see. Okay. Schweers and Gears. I need to catch up already. Okay. Schweers and Gears. I've got a question for Andy. I'm looking for a baseline recommendation on Holley air bleed sizes for a pair of 600 vacuum secondary carbs. I converted the removable bleed and all state carb annular boosters.
Probably going to need to be around 70 to 71 high speed air bleed on that. I'm pretty sure that's where I wound up. Man, I'd have to get my book out, but I'm wanting to say they were on my vacuum secondary carbs. I had those which had step down legs, but they were at 70 or 71 high speed air bleed. You might have to go a little bit bigger with the annular, so maybe a 73 would do it.
Here's something that's interesting. Dakota's Timeout says Engine Master show with Freiberger that did, and that bunch tested a Holley with a choke tower and one without, and it made about 20 horsepower better without the choke tower. And I can see that. Oh, yeah. Well, I could see that being the case because it allows the air. If you've ever seen like an aftermarket air hat that they put on for race cars, it'll have it has tapered air venturi, I guess, into the carburetor. And that's to eliminate the carburetor having to pull air through that little small opening, right? It allows it to flow in there evenly. And those things make 20 horsepower difference. So I could see that air horn probably would be, or I guess the choke horn would be a hindrance. I've
Yeah,
never cut one
and
off.
I also think there's other factors that come into play. I think it probably depends on the engine you're dynoing, the air demand of that engine, whether or not the choke horn would be a restriction. If you're putting too small of a carburetor on an engine to begin with, then that's going to show more of a gain. You see what I'm saying?
Right. Well, the other thing on a Q-Jet, I don't think the choke horn is going to be the factor because that's only in the primaries, and the primaries are only 250 CFM. The
Oh, I was talking
big
about the
bastard.
Holly. I was
Right.
talking.
No, I could see that it being on the Holly because that's 500 CFM or so.
Yeah.
Right. But on that Q-Jet, it's so small of an amount of air that you're limiting through those primaries. The big ones are the back doors, what's doing all the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't have that at all. But stock eliminator guys run like a rubberized air hat that they got on them, and that
Yep.
allows it to evenly distribute the air as it's coming in.
Well,
And
I
that does
know
make
for a fact, because when we took the car on a test drive, we drove it without the air cleaner, and then we just put the base on it. And you could definitely tell the difference.
Really?
Just with the base. Yeah, because it smooths the airflow into it. So
Right. And I have one of those. I'm gonna test that on. I got to do some dyno work here soon. I'm about to ready to pop off my whole new season of Mr. Rotter's Neighborhood stuff because I'm just about
all
caught up with
right.
all my stuff. Yeah. And the first thing I'm going to do is we got a 300 Buick. It's a 66 or 7 that I just put a 4-barrel intake manifold from a 65 on there. And I'm going to see what kind of power improvement it makes just by, the comparison of the original numbers to what it would, because it was never dynoed. That intake was not available on any low compression 300 Buick. So I want to see what the power difference really is, what you
Yeah.
gain from that intake manifold. A lot of guys are paying $600 for them. Is the $600 for that cast iron factory intake manifold, since no one makes an aftermarket one, is it worth 20, 30, 40 horse that you gain? I don't know what it gains.
Right.
So we're going to find out.
You got a
Then,
super chat.
yeah, I see that. I was trying to pick my way to it.
Oh,
Let's see. D150 says, do you guys think the newer MSD 6ALs are as good as the older ones that needed the chips instead of the dial? Just don't want to run a laptop using 2 VRSs on a Mopar Performance tunnel ram.
nice.
Oh, let's see. Do I think the newer MSD 6ALs are as good as the older ones that needed the chips instead of the dial? Me, I've had no experience with the earlier ones with the chips. I only have the newer MSD 6AL2. But mine does not require a laptop, but it's got a couple dials that you can just click and set it on. I'm assuming he's talking about a new 6AL or something that requires a laptop, or maybe a
Yeah,
7.
there's some now that's actually Bluetooth capable.
Really? A
Yeah,
6AL?
yeah,
I wouldn't assume. Here's my philosophy these days. Nothing newer is better. That's my philosophy. I hate to say that. I don't want to punch MSD in the face, but I guess we get no money from them, so it doesn't really matter. I'll tell you my philosophy on it. Nothing newer is better. They're always figuring out how to provide what they had for you before at a lesser cost. And generally the cost is reliability.
yeah.
And that's kind of where I've been leaning.
Honestly, going back to that, the ones with the chips, I've had many of those that work perfect. And went to the later one, and I burned 2 of them up personally. So,
Oh,
for
there you
me,
go.
if I had a choice, I would definitely keep the older one that needs the chips. But, that's just my personal opinion.
But I've seen those chip ones up, and that's what we were talking about at the beginning. I think we might not have been live, huh? Or yeah, we were, because I said it's got the MSD box on the 4.6, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, they up and just fail. There's no indication it's going to fail. It doesn't miss. It doesn't pop or anything. It just
Go to
won't
crank
run.
it. You go to crank it, and it will not fire.
Right. It just won't run. And that's where a lot of guys in the 90s and early 2000s, You used to have another MSD box in the glove box. That used to be the ticket.
That's why circle track cars have 2 ignition systems.
NASCAR cars had 2. Matter of fact, it used to be displayed on the dash right behind the camera, right in front of the camera. You see 2 ignition boxes, and there's a switch right next to them to change it over.
That's it.
So, and they did that on purpose because it worked great. It's just the reliability wasn't there. And really what it is the caps in there. The capacitors in there can only charge and discharge so many times. And that's how those things work. Well, and if you didn't know how MSD really functions, it's only a capacitive discharge setup, like a multi-spark. That's what MSD stands for, multi-spark discharge, right? It's a capacitive discharge system in there, much like the cheapy cameras used to be, then where you could buy the cameras off the shelf. They had a capacitive discharge flash. These things only work up to like about 2,500 RPM, and then you can't charge the caps fast enough to have a multi-spark. So they would have a multi-spark up to like 2,500 RPM, and then anything beyond that was just a single spark capacitive discharge.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, where did I lose? Okay, Buick Smith is saying he has an issue he's never seen. If I take the oil fill cap off and put cardboard over the hole, it will try to suck it in. Any ideas? When I turn the engine off, it wheezes for about 2 seconds. Yeah, if you have a PCV valve in there, it's probably got a plug breather.
Yeah.
If the breather can't breathe, it's going to create vacuum in the crankcase.
And that's most likely what it is.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, James Show is saying the booster placement and fuel atomization on the VRS is going to be hard to beat. Edelbrock did their homework with this thing, apparently. I haven't tested one, but Andy has. And like he said, it was 20 horsepower gain over built quadrajet that was built for the application.
And I can tell you that they drive like a dream on my truck out of the box.
Really?
Take it for what it's worth. I had hours and hours tied up in the Dominators to make them where they would run and drive and be kind of smooth, These right out of the box, man, it was just phenomenal.
Buick Smith is saying, so you guys are saying they need to build a spread bore VRS. Nice. I think the days of the spread bore are gone.
Yeah. Actually, you can almost consider AVS2 that.
The AVS2, I had my it's not a spread bore, and I just used one on a 300 Buick.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, out of the box, that sucker was so off.
Really?
I was breaking the motor and I can get it to run. But when I got it done, because that's the suckiest part about breaking an engine is you try to get all the stuff close as possible. Yeah. And I try to use a carburetor that is known good. I try to use a distributor that's a known good. And that way it lights right off. You break it in, and then you put your other stuff on it and you adjust it. Well, I didn't have carburetor, so I used this one right out of the box. And literally I'd read the instructions like, hey, run it on the car first and then make adjustments. Okay, great. So I put it on, started up, broke it in, and it ran. It wasn't too far off. When we got done breaking it in, I whacked the throttle on it, killed the motor. Right. And it was like so rich, it blew this big plume of black smoke out when I whacked the throttle.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, wow, let's read up on this. And they say, yeah, we set the secondary air door really loose, kind of in the ballpark, because we're assuming people are going to use it for, a small cubic inch all the way up to big cubic inch. And I'm like, man, that's your quadra bog right there. If anything, set that sucker tight and let it come on too late. Coming on too early. So that's where you get the big plume of black smoke and the sucker dies.
Yeah.
So, I see John Wilburn saying the same thing. I think spread board is just an evolutionary step we don't need anymore. And that's agreeable. Yeah. I don't think it's necessary anymore at all. You'll never see the spread board really make a comeback. If it does, it's going to be because people, and I think that time's already passed as well, but you would see people taking the fuel injection systems off because they can't afford to maintain them, and then put, like an old truck, like let's say, in late 90s GMC. Okay. They take the Vortec intake spider off and put just a carburetor intake on there and a quater jet. It'd probably get pretty decent mileage,
Right.
if you're going to daily it. But Dakota saying mixed breadboard is great again. I'm trying, buddy. Let's see.
One quadrijet at a time.
Michael Schmidt says the choke horn seems to be a restriction with certain scoops and air cleaners that are not big to begin with or have small openings. And it's probably just because it's blocking airflow.
Yeah.
If you narrow it down with that small opening and it would make it worse. Oh, Wilburn likes my shirt. This is like a 20-year-old shirt, when in doubt, bored out. But,
I like that.
Let's see. Levi's backyard performance. What motorsport requires the most skill as a driver? In drag racing, it's frowned upon to put other cars into the wall. In dirt circles, it's recommended. I don't think in dirt circles it's recommended at all.
Unless you want to get some teeth knocked out.
Yeah, that's a good way to get in a fight.
Yeah.
And it's at the small dirt tracks that happens every weekend.
And then a race breaks out every once in a while.
But the motorsport that requires the most skill as a driver, I would probably have to say is like road racing.
Mm-hmm.
Your Formula Ones and your SCCA type racing.
Mm-hmm.
It takes the most driver or skill of the driver.
Now, Micah's brother, Seth, is really big into hill climb racing. Now, that takes some skill.
I've never seen
Or
that.
like rally racing.
Rally racing, those are probably some of the greatest drivers. Yeah, those are probably some of the greatest drivers on the planet. In the early 2000s, Speed Channel used to air all those WRC races. And I loved watching. Back then, those guys were super skilled. And then being in the Navy, we would go overseas, and I always tried to catch a WRC race, like live, be standing in Argentina when they go flying by you at 20 feet up, 120 miles an hour. I wanted to get like just the dirt experience where they fly over the hill and you're there holding a beer, like, yeah. So never happened though. Okay. So Dust Garage says there's a regular digital 6AL and the 6AL programmable. The latter, you need a laptop. Okay, I haven't seen those.
Yeah.
Oh, here you go. Buick Smith is saying the same thing. WRC Rally or the 125cc class on the Isle of Man. You know those small, all the small CC stuff, that's what builds driver skill.
Absolutely.
Those things are going so slow comparatively to the other, the large CC or large cubic inch classes, that you can't just outrun them. You have to build driver skill. And that's what was always good. What I liked about the 80s Busch Grand National Series stuff. They were using V6s and all that. And you would really see the guys that shine. And then what you would also see was the dudes that were winning on the NASCAR track were the ones that were winning at the Busch Grand National Series.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's see what else we got here. Okay. Sodbuster says, check out the Nostalgia Pro Stock page. Most recent post from 70 to 81. Who won the most? Bob Glidden has 34 wins, and no one even comes close. Mostly in the Cleveland and the ugly Fairmont. The Fairmont may have been ugly because it was pretty box shaped, but golly, that one that Bob Glidden had was just sexy.
Yes, it was. And
it had the right rake. Yeah, it had the right rake. It had everything. It was so
And he
nice.
went from that to a Plymouth Arrow. No disrespect to the Mopar guys, but the Plymouth Arrow is an ugly car.
Let's see. Dakota's Timeout is asking, would a coil like a flamethrower coil, or those supposed to souped up modules for HEI distributors, does any of that stuff make your ignition system better? Yeah. A hotter coil always makes a hotter spark. Okay. The problem with the hotter coil is if you got points, they'll burn your points sooner. The other problem with the HEI modules, the HEI module has a longer dwell period, right? The more you can saturate the coil, the better the spark you get. If you've got an 8-to-1 engine, you'll never see any difference whatsoever on that. You need like higher compression ratio, and then what it is when you run the higher compression ratios, normally you close the plug gap, but on those on the HEIs with the longer dwell period, you can open that gap back up to the stock gap, and you'll gain some power out of that.
Take a guess what gap we run in the Fairmont and the little mod motor.
And you run a distributor on it, right?
Yeah.
And nitrous? 35?
About 18.
Oh, 18. You close it up that tight, huh?
With that much compression and that much nitrous, yeah.
Well, you said it's 14-to-1, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to need to close it up pretty big. Yeah.
And a healthy supply of dash 11 plugs.
Oh, man. Blue Grit Garage is saying, or Andy, do you have any experience with the Holly carbs with the one-piece bottom with integral bowls and removable top like the original Ford Cracker Jack box carbs?
The 4010 is what those are called. And I've actually only had one, and it's pretty much like a Autolite carburetor. It's kind of like an Autolite knockoff, really. But they're actually pretty good carburetors. But now Summit, if I'm not mistaken, sells that same exact carburetor.
I think they do have their own carburetor. Yeah, they took the Autolite and built their own.
Yeah.
But I think they fixed
real world experience, something tuning. No, I don't have that. Something,
Oh, speaking of that, I should have probably answered this before we went live. I'm sure you have some familiarity with rebuilding Holly carbs, right?
Yeah.
Well, I got a 3310 780. That's like a DZ302 piece. And
really?
It's supposed to be the same carb, right? I don't know if it's off of a DZ302. I don't know. But I need it rebuilt and put the DZ302 specs.
Well, bring it on down.
Okay. Well, I will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a DZ302 plan in my future. Let's see. Levi's Backyard Performance is a tube chassis that has steel roof and quarter panels and a VIN from an original car. Is that, or should that be considered a street car or legal for steel roof and quarter classes? To me, no.
You're talking about all steel, all glass, and that argument will go on forever.
In my opinion, we blurred the lines of the street car, race car a long time ago, and you can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? You'll never convince the guy that has the full-blown pro mod with blinkers on it that he's got a race car with blinkers on it. He's got a street car if he drives on the street.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't matter if he just drives at 100 feet on the street. It's street car.
That steel roof and quarters thing is a carryover from the pro stock days, the heyday of pro stock days, when you used to buy what they called a body in white. Body in white was literally a body off the assembly line, and they originally came white, was the only color you could get them in, and they came with a VIN, but it wasn't I don't think you could even title them.
You could not title it,
yeah, but that's what pro stock used to mandate. It used to have the steel roof and the factory quarter panels off the car. And that's why if you look at, like, say, the one that was the most extreme was like Bob Glidden's 88 Thunderbird. It had a fiberglass front end made by Harry Glass, and it was extended by 2 foot or something. It looks disproportionate. When you look at it, it looks like an 88 Thunderbird, 87 Thunderbird, but it looks disproportionate when you put next to an 87, 88 Thunderbird.
Right.
But the quarters in the roof and the quarter windows and I believe the doors were the same exact length. So that's something that's just a carryover from old Pro Stock, and now I don't think they do any of that. They used to template them.
Yeah, a lot of these classes now mandate that you have to have so many inches of factory frame rail in the car, subframe, factory firewall, things of that sort to be considered all steel, all glass, depending on where you're at.
I just my take on it, my opinion on it was, if you're gonna, the line's already been blurred. You can't, like I said, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. But I was trying to make a class when I first started the AHRA that used the factory body panels, frame rails, suspension pickup points, and that made it a legit production car. Streetable, I didn't really care about, but it was originally a production car. And what I was trying to do was bring back the heyday of Pro Stock. And if you took like the first 3 years of Pro Stock and applied it to any car, and that's what I thought would be a really cool class, right? Because the first 3 years of Pro Stock was just the best.
Absolutely.
That was when all the awesome things happened. And there was so many cars that were in Pro Stock after that never got that first couple of year treatment.
Mm-hmm.
You can easily build a Pro Stock car at home. A first couple of years Pro Stock car, not something now.
Yeah.
But if you ran about 990, that's the number that they ran.
When I went to visit Herb McCandless and Buddy Martin up in their shop, Herb told me, he said, you would not believe the difference between a 70 Pro Stock car and a 72. He said they were night and day difference, and pretty much they were already figuring out by 72 what they needed to do to go fast. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
70 car, if you look at most of them, they'll have like a Lakewood bolt-in 3-point roll bar, and that was it. By 72, you were actually seeing tube chassis cars.
Right. Yeah.
It progressed that quick.
Yeah. That thing evolved so fast. And okay, so the reason why I have a love affair with the first, and I guess I say it wrong. When I say the first 3 years of Pro Stock, it's not necessarily the first 3 years of Pro Stock. In HRA world, it's only like 1 year. Okay. Yeah. But before that, the AHRA had a super stock class that was
super stock.
Yes, heads up super stock that was specifically for those cars. And what happened was, it was such a gangbusters idea. NHRA came in and created their own glass just by calling it a different name.
Yeah.
And then it took off on the NHRA front. But the first 3 years of that, it was match bash, heads up super stock is really what it was.
Yeah.
They took just a super stock car. And I want to say Buddy Martin said that there was 9 things you could do to the car. You could run a fiberglass hood. You could run a fiberglass deck lid. You could run 2 4-barrel intake manifold. I can't remember if the dual plug thing was in there. And then you could run a camshaft that was not a factory spec cam.
Right.
And then I believe the transmission, you could run any transmission you wanted. Right. Well, that thing took off, and it was gangbusters. And the AHRA was leading it for 2 years. And then all of a sudden, the NHRA got in the game, and that's where everybody sees the pictures. But the love affair I have is, I would love to have the Pro Stock days back, where you see the Grump doing after he does the burnout in the 70 car. Okay. And that 70 Camaro was not competitive. It was not light enough. Okay. That's how fast it evolved. That 70 Camaro, he did a burnout like a New England Dragway, because New England Dragway was an AHRA track up until the demise of the AHRA. And he was doing he had done a burnout, and he was backing up, and he has the door open, and he's leaned out the door with a cigar in his mouth, a regular helmet without a shield on, right? Looking behind him, backing up the car. That to me is what it's all about. That's pro stock. That's
And the
real
fans
deep.
loved it.
Oh yeah. And if you look, there is a video here on YouTube. If you like pro stock stuff, there's a video here on YouTube of the Grump versus Dick Landy about 71 or 2. It was right after the Grump created the Monza, or the Vega. I'm sorry, the Vega. And there is, I think, Ontario, Canada.
They're in Canada.
Have you seen this video, right?
I have.
And it
I've
is
got a whole
absolutely
video
amazing.
on my channel that's got like 300,000 views on the Grump.
Really?
This. Yes.
Well, I mean, in this video, it's shot on 8mm, and it's like 3 burnouts, 2 of them in rosin,
Yes.
and it's like half track burnouts, back them up, and they're both, and it probably took 30 minutes a pass for each guy.
It was crazy.
The Grump did a burnout, stopped, backed up, got out of the car, and walked the track.
But the cool part about it was, before they got in their car, they were the ones out there putting the rosin down and sweeping it into the track.
Yeah. And it was a match race.
Yes.
It wasn't even like a NHRA event or an AHRA event. It was a match race. So that's the difference. That's the showmanship stuff that I love. It's all heart and soul. If you think about the stripe, the finish line races, I hate them. That's what's come about since the 90s, is those finish line races.
Yep.
Where are the stands at? The stands are at the beginning. No one cares about the stripe. They just look at the light.
Yes.
So
early days of pro stock, and then you can thank Dick Landy for bringing in the Linko.
And that's because nobody could shift like Mr. 4-Speed.
Yeah. And Dick Landy, Buddy Martin told me this. He said he tore up stuff every single pass. Dick Landy did, and he brought out the first Linko.
Well, I saw a T10 shifter that the Grump had done, where he'd taken the T85 3-speed shifter, and then it has the same H pattern, except for all the way over and up is reverse, and then first is down. Okay. But what he did was he separated reverse off of the shifter where you couldn't accidentally put it in reverse.
Okay.
And had red ball on the side of the shifter. You lifted it up and put it in reverse. Once you got your regular shifter in neutral, you lifted that up and put it in reverse. And that way you could back the car up, and you never miss a gear because it only has 4 detents on that shifter, on that 3-speed shifter. And each one of them is a forward gear. So
that's what I need to do with Casper. You got me thinking I'm going to get me a big old stogie, do a massive burnout, open the door. Oh, yeah. Back her up and do a couple dry hops.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man, if we were to have a good event like that, man, you could almost relive the heydays of the first couple of years of pro stock, Oh, let's see. Let me catch up because
we got on a tangent there.
Yeah, my love affair has drugged me on.
Yes.
Let's see here. Okay. Levi, did I do any advertising for this class? I think it would go off. My car would fit that class. Your car wouldn't fit that class because you got a turbo. That was all naturally aspirated. Pro stock was. And that class that I created was GT class. It was the same way. You didn't have a power adder. But yes, I did advertising. It was in the first couple of years I did the AHRA. Matter of fact, when I brought that class back, it made such a big deal at PRI what was his name? Reinhardt, who was the voice of the NHRA at the time, came over and started reading our flyers like, man, this is a really bitchin' class. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what lassoed me up with Animal Jim. Animal Jim wanted to run that class.
Sweet.
Let's see. Okay. Oh, never mind. And Danny Boyd's asking, was the 70 Camaro, and he's referring to the Grump car, a 396 or 402? And I think it was a Z01 427. Is what I
Yeah.
believe the Grump ran those.
Yeah, but I don't know what it would originally started out as. Maybe. When did
70
Chevrolet go to the 402 designation?
Well, 70 was the gloves were off, and that would have been a
No, I'm
LS6.
talking about production stuff.
Well, it would have been. You would have had a 454 in a Camaro, right?
Yeah, but now you had a 396, the 402. I know it, the reason why the 402 designation come about was because they had developed the 400 small block, and to avoid confusion between which engine was which, they called the big block the 402 and called the small block the 400.
Wasn't that
And really, it was
71?
396.
That'd have been 71 then, right? Because the 400 small
Probably.
block was full size cars.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that 70 Camaro was probably a 396 car.
Probably was.
Yeah, and he probably got it locally there in because he lived in like Halvern, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Okay. John Wilburn saying Bob Glidden brought in the Liberty dual countershaft trans in '91, and that's the only thing that replaced the Lenko.
Mm-hmm.
And the Liberty is where it's at today. That's what everybody's running today. So, but if you way back in the '80s, if you watched Pro Stock, it used to be awesome to watch them roll the gears because they were all right next to each other in a Lenko, right?
Yes.
Let's see. I'm trying to find some questions. Levi's backyard performance Dallas NA power is expensive to get and hard to make rules for. It's not hard to make rules for. It's just you have to be skilled and build it.
Make power.
Yeah, here's the way I had set up the rules was it was weight to cubic inch based because that's how the original Pro Stock stuff was, weight to cubic inch.
Power
right?
adders have killed engine builders.
Yeah, I agree with that. But NA is hard, and you got to know what you're doing.
Yeah, it separates the men from the boys real quick.
That was what I wanted. I mean, you can't think about this. You can build a 300 horsepower engine in your garage, and then put a bunch of nitrous on it and make 1,000 horse. But it really takes somebody with some tedious thought processes to build 1,000 horse NA motor.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Danny Boyd said, I heard it became a 402 in order to get over 400 and have less stringent emission standards.
That may be true. I don't know. I was always under the assumption that it was to separate the 400 small block from the 396.
Twisted Mopar Garage says horsepower costs money.
Absolutely.
If you're building it yourself, it actually costs a lot less. I'll tell you that just from experience. Now, if you pay somebody to build it, get out the cards, right? Or a checkbook, however you want to do it. But if you're building it yourself and you're thinking outside the box, it's really not all that bad. It's something that's really, I wouldn't say it's affordable, but it could easily. Okay. The first few years of Pro Stock, why I love it is because anyone could compete. Anybody there was guys building Pro Stock cars that were like carpenters and guys that had Pro Stock cars that were in the military. There was guys that built Pro Stock cars.
Your average guy could show up and have a chance to qualify and make the field.
What happened is when the Grump built the tube Vega, that's where the first really deep cut in Pro Stock happened, and the regular guy was gone.
Yeah,
because you couldn't afford, because now you had to build a chassis for a car that you bought. You had to go buy a car and then build a chassis in it. And there was only about, well, maybe 20 guys in the country at the time that could build the chassis like that.
Yeah.
And then once you got the car with the chassis in it, you needed a nice motor. So then you went and saw, I don't know, Rear Morrison, got yourself the latest and greatest big block Chevrolet with 1,000th quench on the head. And that was their ticket. Like they would say, if you cannot read the piston manufacturer's logo on the head, then it's not tight enough.
That's right.
But that's what happened to the small guy, was you couldn't compete anymore because those things had just gotten so far out of hand. And and the Grump even said it in his last interview I saw, like in 2006. He said, that's the biggest regret I have in my life, was he built a ringer that beat the rules, and he destroyed the class that he would love. That's what he said. I ruined the class that I love. And pro stock just got to be out of hand. And then now it's to the point where, like I said, the genie, once it gets out of the bottle, you can't put it back in.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was the highest paid athlete in 1972. Did you know that?
Who's that?
Bill Jenkins.
Grumpy Jenkins.
He made over $250,000 with that Vega.
Wow. Just endorsements? Or
he made the cover of Life magazine.
Well, like that dude, well, one, he wore some of the coolest clothes that could ever have been. Bell bottoms and plaid stuff. But he did there's been a lot of drawings of him where he had a sponsorship through Holly. And so he did like Lakewood traction bars, and he was always peddling that kind of stuff. But they did a drawing of him as a poster in the middle of like Carcraft magazine. And I think for those years, like 70, 71, 72, maybe even 73, he was like the Carcraft driver of the year. They used to be a big deal.
Yes.
Yeah. But not anymore. So Clayton's Toolbox says, I often race at an old airport strip. It's bad asphalt. Any traction tips? Last time my car really had a tough time hooking, drag radials, cowl tracks, etc.
Well, you got two things going against you right there: bad asphalt and drag radials. Drag radials really has to have a really prepped surface for them things to really hook. You would probably be better off with a set of floppy tires, a set of slicks. Without knowing what kind of shock setup you have and all of that, it's kind of tough. But a drag radial is not forgiven. Once it loses its hook, it's over. And getting it to recover, it's not going to happen. If you ever notice, you watch a lot of these big time drag races, man, they're on a radial tire. They blow the tires off, they get back in it, and guess what happens? They go into the wall because they get back in it. That tire will not recover.
Well, I know when you're looking at bad tracks, bad tires, or man, let's say your drag radials hook really well. Okay, but see, the problem with drag radials is they work well on a very prepped track.
Yes.
You need something with a forgiving sidewall that slowly applies the power compared to a drag radial. So you do need a wrinkle wall, something that's going to take some of the bite out. And a lot of it is your suspension setup. So you're going to need as much wheel travel or suspension travel in the front as possible on a real dirt track, like, something that's really bad. And that way you can get as weight transfer quickly. But you don't want to sag the back end, right? When you sag the back end, I always found that when I sag the back end is when the car, what I mean by that is the front end comes up and the back end squats. Okay. And when it does that, it makes for a real sloppy weight transfer toward the rear, right? But when you have a solid pivot point on the rear and the front end just comes up, that's where you're taking the rear suspension out as much as possible. And it doesn't have it so sloppy. But like a really poor track, you're probably going to need as much as possible. So you probably want both ends slopping around. I can assume. Yeah, it probably would work better with some really weak shocks in the rear and a lot of front suspension front suspension travel.
Yep.
Right.
And a set of
You've seen,
slicks would make all the difference.
yeah, and then change your rear tires. So go some slicks. So something with a wrinkle wall that's going to take some of the bite out of it. The drag radio's got too stiff a sidewall.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Levi's still pushing for getting the young guys out there. Yeah, it's a hard thing to do, man. It is a hard thing to do. Trust me, I've tried it. So Hippie Miller says it became a 402 because they didn't want a big block with less cubic inches than the 400 small block.
And that's what I've heard, that for them to be different and, from a marketing standpoint.
See, Dust Devil Grass saying nowadays I think that class will be filled with box bodies. To tell you the truth, like Pro Stock, I think you're talking about Pro Stock or that class I was telling you about, the one I tried to make. It may have been, but even back in the day, the Fox body was not the big ticket. There was guys running Fox bodies, but I would say the ones that you saw at the track a lot was Camaros.
Yeah.
Even the third gen Camaros the second gen Camaros were everywhere. First gen Camaros were everywhere. Camaros were everywhere. Now you just have a lot of Fox bodies because they were plentiful and cheap. And
yeah, the Fox body has become the 55 Chevy of today. You know what I'm saying? What that was 30, 40 years ago.
Okay, so Tall Garage is saying if horsepower isn't cheap, people with money always win.
Not necessarily.
That's not entirely true because the Grumpy Jenkins didn't have a pile of money. He thought his way around the problem, and that's what I like. When you took the regular guy out of Pro Stock, you eliminated a lot of the ingenuity, right? Ronnie Sox was considered one of the best drivers in Pro Stock up until the Linko came out, and the Linko made everyone Ronnie Sox.
You need three things to be successful in racing. You do need money, you need knowledge, and you need desire.
And then you need a rich, I don't know, sugar mama to fund the whole thing.
There you go.
Yeah, but Danny Boyd took a lot of character for the Grump to say, yeah, and that was one of his last interviews in like 2006. He also did a spread in Hot Rod magazine that set him up to look like Burt Reynolds on the bearskin rug. Let's see here. And here was something I was looking at today. See, I love the history of drag racing because it just came along at the right time.
Yes.
With everything that was going on. I got this picture. Let me see. I'm going to John Wilbur in this picture. It showed up the other day on Facebook, and I'm like, dude, this is in one picture says everything you need to know about drag racing like 1976. Okay. So I don't know if you can see this. This is a black and white photo of a girl with a big knockers wearing a Blue Max halter top, right? And I'm like, that is everything.
Everything.
This in the 70s drag racing, that was exactly the way it was, right? Everybody was into it. And gosh, man, that's what I kind of wanted to bring back when I did the AHRA. I wanted to bring back some of the feeling of that. I knew you weren't going to get the old cars back, not easily. No one's going to bring the Blue Max out unless you pay him a few grand for show-up money.
Yeah.
But I wanted to bring the ingenuity back. I wanted to bring the guys back that was bringing. See, there's a lot of things that people won't tell you or you don't even consider. Right? An altered drag car. You think you got to have like some super expensive, crazy Alston chassis and expensive chassis and suspension and a 9-inch Ford that's unexplodable. And no, you could literally go down to Speedway Motors and buy a 23T chassis and put a 9-inch Ford on it and just some junkyard bullet and go have at it. There's nothing stopping anyone from doing that. And I don't know why there isn't more people doing that.
Yeah. And I still say, look at what Jeff from Two Hacks is doing.
Right. With the
building
dragster.
that slingshot dragster. I still don't think there's a cheaper way to go fast
There's
than
not.
that. Motor on a stick.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not really any cheaper way. Matter of fact, Don Garlitz said that's how he got into it because that's the only thing he could afford was a dragster.
Yeah.
Okay, so Clayton's Toolbox is saying, thanks, I have a set of softball slicks I got cheap because the guy who took them off damaged the beads. I wasn't sure how safe that is. I wonder if tubes would help. Yeah, run tubes.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as they seal up, run the tubes, and then I'll tell you what he did probably damaged the beads was he ran screws to the wheels. Do the same thing.
He screwed it to the bead.
Yes, do the same thing and put tubes in it, and you'll be fine. Okay. Yeah. Fab Race Mod repeat the Mighty Blue Max, Rip Raymond Beetle. There was just a lot. Everybody knew the drivers, the cars. It was a different time.
Absolutely.
Oh, dude, hot girls are not allowed in today's world.
I don't know what world you living in, buddy.
Were you on drugs when you came to this show tonight?
I think Levi's just wanting to stir it up.
Dallas, you don't want Wendy and I running around in halter tops. Oh, bring it. It doesn't matter. Okay. Yeah, bring on the YouTuber match races. I think it would be cool.
It really would.
I don't know about just YouTuber, but I've actually kicked this idea around for a couple of years. I thought about making a $5,000 claimer class. And what would be really cool is that you can't claim them till the end of the race.
Right.
Right. But that way, if it's somebody like, I don't know, let's say you do a YouTube channel and they build a car to run the $5,000 claimer class. And you can build whatever you want, $5,000 claimer class. And I mean, the smart ticket would be like, go find a motorcycle, but that doesn't always the case. It doesn't matter. It's whatever you can build for $5,000.
Yeah.
Because you could build one of those T-buckets, like I was telling you, for pretty dang cheap. You get somebody else's old T-bucket project and big block and some spray, and you're in under $5,000, and you're probably running just as fast as that motorcycle. But,
well, that's like Lyle Barnett. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but like Beer Money, that was a $10,000 challenge to build that car.
Yeah, that white Mustang.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where I know him from. Yeah, but I thought about doing a $5,000 claimer class where you build your car, you run it, you win the event. But since you won the event, anybody else that ran with you can claim that car for $5,000.
Yep.
And that way, if you show up with your big giant pile of money and you build something stupid and you get a $30,000 race car and you whack everybody, hey, cool, here's your trophy, right? the guy that got second place has got the first bid on you
Yeah.
because he's buying your car for $5,000. Let's see. There's a match race happening at No Name Nationals, cheap versus budget. Isn't that the same thing?
Yeah, that's kind of weird. I wonder what he's talking about.
I don't know. Let's see. Dan, in my opinion, Hot Girl will be a No Name Nationals, but I'll let your imagination do the work. Okay.
It's getting into the weird hour.
Maybe it is, and we're only an hour and 6 minutes in, so I guess it could be the weird hours, the last 54 minutes of weird hour.
Yeah.
Let's see. Tall garage. Yes, Dallas, it is the same thing. Yeah, it is. Cheap versus budget. So there you go. Rail with a turbo LS would be good in the clamor class. Yeah. Yeah, it would. And it'd be interesting just to see where the thing goes if you put like a $5,000 cap on it, right? Can you build a rail with a turbo LS? You probably could get the turbo and LS. I don't know if you could get the rail after that. It'd be tough. And then meet all your safety requirements. But I just thought about doing the $5,000 claimer because I thought it was fun. I also thought about doing where you pick a vehicle, and that's the vehicle that everybody has to run in the class. And the one I was looking at was, and then don't laugh, the Dodge minivan remained the same for almost 11 years. So anyone could go buy one of those and literally be in the class.
Yeah.
So Dizzy Izzy says, welcome to my nightmare. Every hour is the strange hour, I'm assuming. I can believe that, Dizzy. Just build an engine on a stack of metal. Yeah, you could do it. I used to call the dragsters, altereds, and funny cars pipe buggies because that's really what they are. It's like a sand rail with some hairy motors on them. So
I would think that a $5,000 climber class would be pretty popular.
I think so. And I mean, I think the only limitations you'd have to do is like, okay, here's the tire they're running. Let's say a 28-10-5. That's the tire you got to run. You can't run anything bigger. You can't run anything smaller. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, actually, maybe you could run something smaller.
Yeah.
You just can't run anything bigger. And then Buick Smith is saying, I have a 27T tub and some tubing, but a rail that the tub looks like a big anvil is a dream. I think you're going to I think you can build something out of that easy. And if you want to get really creative, you talk to the Rat Rod guys, which would take a cab off of an S10, put it on that 23 chassis, that 23 T bucket frame, and then go have at it. Because then it has everything you need in it. Yep. But that's how I would do it. I mean, I would do it. Whatever free parts you could get goes towards building the car.
It would be all rat rotted up.
It would. And then my $5,000 would probably be like $3,000 on car and $2,000 on progressive nitrous system. And that's what I would have. Something cobbled together like that. Nick the Van Man says, I need a white wall class. Colleen, anything untouched from the junkyard is considered junk. It might work, but it is still considered junk. I live and die at parts at the junkyard. How about you, Andy? Do you build stuff?
Oh yeah, I love going to pull apart.
Yeah. See, my race car now has a lot of pull apart parts on it. Okay, and I'll tell you. I mean, there's no secret. There's nothing shameful. When I was building my car, you're right. It takes a lot of money to build something, and I ran into a problem where my father-in-law died, and I didn't have the car finished. So I figured out I wanted some disc brakes for the rear of my T-Bird. I wanted
Mhm.
race strange brakes, right? For 8.8, I think they were $800 to $1,000 at the time. They're not
Yeah.
too terrible. But I just had to bury my father-in-law, and all my money went to that. And I didn't have any extra cash. So the car just sat, and I'm like, man, I really want to get out and race this thing sometime before I die. It's taken me 7 years at this point to build the car, and everything in life just kept coming up. So instead of using those strange brakes, I sat down and did some research, and I ended up using the brakes off of a Ford Aerostar van in the rear. And then I
Mhm.
got the tow package wheel cylinders, which were 1 inch, and they were an inch wider than the Fox drum brake. And then they were an inch larger in diameter. So they went from a 9 inch to like a 10 inch, or maybe from a 10 to 11. I don't remember, but they're considerably bigger and much more surface area than what I had. And it was $43,
Yeah.
right? That's the kind of stuff I really enjoy doing now, is thinking your way around the problem, not spending a ton of money, and then making the thing go. You, you guys have seen my video on the 63 Buick Special, and maybe you haven't, maybe you have, I don't know. The 63 Buick Special had drum brakes all the way around, and there was some weird 4-lug pattern that was only on the Buick Special and the F85 olds, and you couldn't get wheels, and nobody made anything. And I'm like, well, I need to change over to 5-lug. And you saw I did a 5-lug conversion, and then on the front, I put rear aluminum drums from a Grand National on the front of that car, because there's the same size brakes, right? And like an aluminum drum is considerably less weight than a regular drum. And anything that you can take off rotational mass wise, man, that's a big difference. So,
I'm
yeah.
with you, man. That's Aerostar axles. I mean, all kinds of different things. That's one thing about Ford that I do like. If you're willing to get creative, you can get into Ford parts bin at the junkyard and find something 9 times out of 10 to make work.
Especially like 8.8s. 8.8 were,
Especially doing 5-lug conversions on Fox bodies back in the day.
yeah. Well, the thing was, Ford was smart when they did the 8.8 and the
Mhm.
7.5. They're the same rear end, just minus the ring gear and the pinion and the track lock, right? But they got the same axle spline count, the
Yeah.
same width, the same backing plates, the same all of it, and it makes it things really simple to interchange. Let's see. Mostly old parts and rust said. Patrick said, I would be very interested if you did a $2,500 claimer class. Safety equipment does not count. Uh,
That'd be tough.
no. Okay. It isn't that the claimer deal. What it is trying to keep big money from running away from the class. Um,
Mhm.
Safety equipment has to count in there because they're going to buy your car turnkey, like $5,000 at the end of the race. So you have to have the safety equipment price in there. Otherwise, if you got a $5,000 car and the guy buys it for $5,000, well, what are you out? You're not really out much. Maybe your time building the car.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't want it to rob the guys that participated in it.
You didn't want people bringing $20,000 cars.
Right.
They're
And
not
if
going
they
to be
did,
willing to let it be sold for $5,000.
right. But if they did bring a $20,000 car, it was going to get bought and snapped up for $5,000.
Yeah.
That's what keeps the big money out of the class. The problem with the claimers is people get butthurt when they bring that $20,000 car and it gets snapped up for $5,000.
Yeah.
And who do they point the finger at? They point the finger at like the sanctioning body. Hey, you guys, you mean this 5,000? You knew it was 5,000 when you entered it. You
Yeah.
doink. You're the one that spent all the money. So, and that's a gamble you're willing to take, and then you're not willing to live with the consequences. It happens, and the reason why I say that is it happens there's been claimer classes around for a long time. Stock car guys have been doing claimer classes for years, and it happens every weekend at every track. They'll get busted doing something illegal, and they get their car snapped up for pennies on the dollar, and they get butthurt. Let's see. Okay. This is fantastic here. Danny Boyd says, I want to have my wedding at the junkyard if I ever have to get married. If you can find a woman that's willing to do a wedding at the junkyard,
You better.
I would do it, bro. I would do it.
You better do it.
Yeah, that's a keeper right there.
You better hang on dear life.
Yeah, matter of fact, I met a girl not too long ago that I've been talking to, and she wants me to take her to the junkyard. And it's like, all right, if you want to go,
right.
Yeah. So the Aerostar axle thing was a big deal back in the mid 90s. Maybe the late 90s even. And you can always tell the guys that did the Ford Aerostar axle swap at the track because they'd have one axle break. And it's because they always use the same axle. Like an Aerostar is like a Ranger where it's got like an offset. And you can only take like the driver's side axle, right?
Yeah.
So the rule of thumb on an axle is an axle takes a twist. It takes a set from what direction it's used. So if you take that axle off the driver's side and you put it on the passenger side, it's now rotating it backwards. Okay. And then when you put slicks on it and you do like the 5-liter Mustang guys were doing, where it's like T5, hold it to the floor and dump the clutch.
Yes.
They'll shear off the axle. And that's how you knew who was running an Aerostar. But back then, that was the only way you could do it. I mean, aftermarket axles were kind of out of the question. There wasn't anybody making any 8.8 stuff until probably the mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
Let's see. D150 says, Andy, just your opinion, are the sideways mounted 4150s on a tunnel ram and enderly linkage just look cooler, or do they perform better than center squirters or Carter Edelrocks?
It's merely for accessibility of getting the fuel bowls off. In fact, there's a disadvantage because running them sideways, if you have a wideband air fuel meter, like on Casper, the passenger side always runs about a half to 3/4 a point richer than on the driver's side. You see what I'm saying? At part throttle, just cruising around. And that's just nature of having the carburetor sideways and having that little extra throttle opening on the passenger side. Now, when you run them in line, it doesn't seem to be any different, really. I mean, I've done it both ways, but I don't really think there's a performance advantage. It's just makes it a whole lot easier to pull the bowls off and change jets. Does look cooler though.
It looks very pro stockish.
Yeah.
From the 80s. Nick the Van Man digs on my Buick Special engine. He's over here this week when we were breaking in that 454 on the start stand, and it was kind of like ogling my Special. Heavens Mopar says, I think I'm into the Charger, about 7K now, including the car itself. Have the motor and transmission already. I still need sheet metal for the floor. For a Charger, it's a low buck back half build. And, Scott from Heavens Mopars, if you have never seen his Charger, he started off with, in the 80s, what would have been considered a basket case, right? But by today's standards, there's so few of them out there anymore. And then everything that is out there costs $100,000 plus. He's got a pretty good deal going on here.
Right.
Yeah. And I think what he's doing is pretty cool. I don't see any reason why, Scott, if you get the thing back on the road, it's just a huge accomplishment.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Let alone being back aft or whatever. I'm never going to ding you for it, man. I think it's cool that you saved this car, and it literally needed like a roof, quarters, trunk,
everything.
Floor. Yeah. I mean, the only thing he had was like a VIN tag and a cowl, Let's see. Really appreciate this channel, Dallas. Oh, thanks, D150. Let's see.
Yeah,
Dakota's top is my Trans Am right now is a $3,900 body, $150 engine, $20 Q-Jet, and $600 wheels and tires. And dude, that's how you do it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Look,
and then
you can build a car on the cheap. You just got to master the trade of swapping parts with people, picking up deals when you can, selling them to make a profit, putting it back into the car. There's ways around building a car.
there's
And
and Andy's right. There's one big overlooked thing that most people they overlook from the beginning, and that's called sweat equity. If you're willing to do the work yourself, you can pay yourself whatever that thing is worth, the value wise,
yeah,
right? Like let's say you go find a $10,000 really nice looking car. Well, if your car looks like a pile of crap but it's straight, get to sanding, buddy, because when you're done, you can put a $10,000 price tag on that, and you did it all yourself. All that body work, all that Bondo, all that slinging the primer, all that blocking and sanding and painting.
sweat equity. I like that.
Sweat equity. Yeah. And that's what this hobby is all about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Scott says 90% of my build so far is all new AMD metal. And, I feel for you, brother, because there's not many people that's going to be parting out sheet metal off a 68, 69 Charger.
Nope, you're not going to find it. And if, God forbid, you find some new old stock stuff somewhere, you're going to pay dearly for. So you've got to make best with what you can.
So John Wilburn says a big problem with claimer stuff isn't losing a few thousand worth of parts. It's being forced to give your secrets to your competition with it. Yes, sir. That's it.
That's all
if
part of it.
you're doing it ingenuity wise, that's what happens. Danny Boyd says, I always dig seeing babes at the junkyard. Yeah, me too. I don't know when was the last time that happened, though.
Not around here.
Let's see. Levi's Backyard Performance. It's hard, near impossible to build something safe for 5K with safety equipment. I mean, you would be near having stock cars at that point. I don't
No,
think it would gain much attention to last.
no.
$5,000?
Let me tell you something here. You take the 351 that Nick the Van Man just picked up for a couple $100. I seen his video today. It's a 351 EFI. Rip all the stuff off. You could make a killer performing car for $5,000 if you're willing to do it.
Well, okay. Let's just say we're starting with Nick the Van Man's 351 Windsor.
Yeah.
Okay. The easiest thing to do on that Windsor is you can't afford to buy a $2,000 set of heads and a $5,000 claimer class, right? So what you need to do is, I just noticed that it does that when I put my thumb up like this. Okay.
Wait a minute. I got to get my thumb. It don't do it for me.
I don't know. So you take Nick the Van Man's 351 Windsor. You can't buy any good set of heads. So what you need is the best performing head that you can afford to buy. And then in that case, it's probably a set of P heads or a 3-bar GT40s, right?
And no, you can make that motor run. I'm telling you, I've done it.
And that's the one like where you buy the used tunnel ram, you put your 2 Carters on it, and you spray it till the rods fall out of the pan, right?
I had one. If you go on my Facebook page and look at my pictures, there's a white Fox body, and we pretty much did like his $5,000 challenge, but it didn't have probably $3,000 in it. 351 out of an airport van, put a set of 70 DOOE heads on it, put a Comp 280 cam with a Wyand Stealth, some junky Holly that I had. It was like an 800 CFM. But that car ran 780s in a Fox body with a C4 and 410 gear.
Yeah, and you know what? Like thinking outside the box really helps out a lot. If you're like the best Windsor head I can get is a P head. No, the best Windsor head that you can get is a 4-barrel Cleveland open chamber head. You can buy them cheap, right?
Yes.
If you're willing to throw pistons at the thing and you put a Cleveland head on that sucker, now you're talking probably double the horsepower.
You just changed the game.
Yeah. But that's the kind of stuff that you got to be willing to do when you're doing a $5,000 build. You don't care about what kind of car it is. You want to get the car for $0 to $200 for just the body. You care nothing about
Yeah.
how it looks. You don't care what body style it is, nothing. And preferably, it'll fit an 8.8 Ford out of an Explorer from the junkyard.
Yeah. The car almost thought. You know what I'm saying? It's almost an afterthought.
Yeah. And you just want it to be there to hold your battery, hold the engine, the transmission, and the rear end in place. So let's see. Clayton's Toolbox. Any tips for rigging up your car haul or trailer? The way I rig mine, it takes a long time to get the car secured. Any other trailer tips as well? Oh, man.
I wonder if he's got side saddles, pockets, or if I don't know what he's got working with.
I don't know what he's working with either. Because it generally takes a long time to secure one if it's like an enclosed trailer, because they're hard to get around and get it inside and out of the car. But if it's a flatbed trailer, the best things that I've ever seen on a flatbed trailer is a removable fender and a winch, and you just hook it up to a battery and you pull the car into place with the winch, and you put your tie downs on the back and you pull it tight with the winch in the front, and then you add another 2 tie downs in the front once it's tight, and then you just leave your winch kind of dangling there until you go to unload the car, and it takes like minutes.
Dust Devil down there saying, in my opinion, why build a car that you don't care about? I don't see the point. You can't get emotionally tied to the car. You're wanting to go fast.
Oh, I'm trying to I didn't see that one. Where's that? What time is that?
Down, it's like one of the last ones, so it's probably a good bit away from where you're at. Most people get emotionally tied to the car versus thinking about the end goal of trying to go fast.
Yeah, you're trying to go fast for cheap, right?
Yeah.
And so you gotta define the goal, and then how you get there is how you get there, and then fall in love with the car afterwards. Once you start cleaning everybody's clock and it's fun and it's fast and it's cost effective, that's when you're going to fall in love with the thing.
Yeah. It's not love at first sight, I promise.
Yeah, and if anything, like if you already got a bunch of parts squirreled away that you're willing to throw into your $5,000 budget car, go out there and put a price on them. Like instead of selling that set of wheels for $100 a wheel at the swap meet, and if they're light enough to go racing, them suckers are going on the car. Now you find a car that fits those wheels because you already have them. Let's see. Dust Devil saying, I think a builder's class would take the money out of it. People who spend a ton of money don't build their own stuff. That's true. Levi's backyard performance. My car took roughly 9K with no safety, no fuel. With fuel and safety, I'm near 11K. It ran 970s. Okay.
I thought them $500 LS motors were cheap.
You know, 9K. You know, I hate to say this, but your car is the last of the real A bodies, and you could have put a 454 Chevy in there with a bunch of nitrous on it and probably ran 970s.
Yeah.
Pretty easy, and a lot less than 9K. See, the thing I don't like about you have a lot of time and money in fabricating the stuff to make the car go down the track. Your hot side, your cold side, all the piping for it, not just the piping, but the oil supply and return. Man, nitrous oxide, you're done in the afternoon and you're out hammering on it hard. And that's where, guys used to say turbo versus blower versus nitrous. Well, no. Turbo generally is the most time consuming, right? The blower is the most cost prohibitive. Okay, because you're going to go out and buy a $10,000 blower. I don't know what's the new generation like. Vortec, and who was the other one? Power or
Pro Charger.
Pro Charger. They
Yeah,
used to
Pro Charger brought Vortec, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong.
really,
Yeah.
yeah. See, and Levi's saying the engine was free, and I don't know how you got that kind of cash in it then. To be honest with you, that doesn't sound like a budget build. But maybe it was the Holly EFI stuff that put you over the top, dude. Because
Yeah.
and that's what I've been saying the whole time. Holly EFI, EFI is cool in regards to if you're running a turbo. If you're not running a turbo, there's really no gain. My T-Bird there's no gain in me having a Holly EFI on there. I could actually have a carburetor on there and probably be faster. Or I could have two carburetors on there and be faster.
Yeah.
And they're cheaper. There's no way to beat the carburetor. It's for cost-effective bang for the buck, no way. But all your car really needed was like a 454, find a good set of used heads that some crackhead ported that nobody else wants to run on anything, and spray the crap out of it.
Yeah.
I see the car is capable of 850s at 44,004 pounds. Show me someone has done that cheaper with all of the same obstacles. You don't want to do that. I'm going to tell you right now,
It doesn't get the point, I don't think, what we're saying.
No, not at all. He's taking it. He's getting butthurt about it.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm trying to butthurt you. It's what I'm trying to tell you is that there is much cheaper ways to do things. When we were doing it back in the 90s, right? The thing used to be you get a Fox body. It was not a V8 car. Nobody started with a V8 car. Yeah. And you swap in a junkyard 5-liter. And what you do is you try to find a Lincoln Mark 7 because it had a regular HO motor in it that had forged pistons up to 88, 89. Okay. Maybe up to 92. And I think they went to Hypertechnics. So nobody wanted to touch the later ones. And you just get a stock 302. You take it home. You buy a $200 E or B letter cam. You swap it in there. You put a set of most guys at the time were buying GT40P heads because you could get them off a wrecked Explorer for about $350 to $500, depending on how many miles I had on it, for a set of P heads. And then Mac made a set of shorties and long tubes.
Yeah.
And then the ticket was to run an Edelbrock Performer RPM, 650 Holly double pumper, and you could run an automatic, a T5, whatever you wanted, and you put an 8.8 in that Mustang because let me tell you, there's a lot of 8.8s out there. And it wasn't just the Mustang that came with them. The Turbo Coupes came with them.
Yeah. It didn't matter what it came out of. 9 times out of 10, it's going in a Fox body.
Yeah, and 9 times out of 10, it came out of another Fox body and was bolted into your Mustang that you're building.
Yeah.
And then for like $4 or $5 grand, you were running probably 1150s. Cars will run pretty good on and you feed them like a 150 to 250 shot, and it just got to the point where that became somebody buying a set of rods and a good crank, and now they got a 400 shot on it. And then when they started making really good heads, because the early aluminum ones were sucky, like Edelbrock came out with a Performer head that was absolute poo bag. It was great when it first came out, but I think it did like 3 different generations of them, because what happened is they came out with theirs first. They had the foundry, they had all the knowledge and know-how and ingenuity, and then Trick Float came out with the high port head.
That was it.
Murdered them. Yeah.
Murdered.
And then so they went back to the drawing board, and I think they came out with like 3 different generations of that Performer head, and they finally just gave up on it. and then went on to
high port head is still a really good head.
It is. It's a great head. But yeah, it blew up and it went fast. It went fast. It like if you didn't buy something new at the beginning of the race season, you just got left behind. Um, man,
I miss those days.
me too. It was so much fun. And it
Was.
was like you blow it up. Guess what you did? You went to the junkyard. You found another 5-liter HO motor out of Lincoln, and you sprayed that one to death. Sometimes you just got one out of a Crown Vic or Lincoln Town Car. It didn't
Whatever.
really, yeah, it didn't really matter. If you didn't blow if you didn't put rods through the pan, excuse me, rods through the pan from your HO motor, you try to swap them pistons over. It was nuts, man. But for $5,000, these guys were easily running 11s. Now, what I was getting at with you is like that. You could have went faster for cheaper if you stopped focusing on the things that are unimportant, right? Or you started focusing on the things that are unimportant, I guess I should say. Like, you got to give up on the street driving thing. You don't want to serve two masters. You're going to spend a ton of money and you're never going to go nowhere, right?
Mhm.
It'll be a horrible drag strip car and it'll be a terrible street car. It won't be good at either one. You just got to decide, okay, I got to build a street car or I'm going to build a drag car, right? And when you do that, your 4,400 pounds that you're saying here, your 4,404 pounds, no drag racer in the right mind runs around with 4,404 pounds. You take all that stuff out right away.
Yep, unless you're this guy.
What's that?
I said, unless you're this guy, you can't do nothing about it.
Well, yeah, but your truck probably weighed 5,200 pounds and you pulled 1,000 pounds out of it, right?
No, it's actually probably gotten heavier. Seriously, adding stuff to the engine and all, with the massive heads and all that.
Well, and then you did a dart block instead of a factory block, right? Or
Yeah,
was it Ford Motorsport block?
it's a motorsport block. Yeah,
Yeah, so it's probably 200 pounds heavier than the factory block.
yeah. The thing about it is, you take that 11-second car that you was just talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, you put a 250 shot on it, and guess what? You've got you a 9-second car for next to nothing, or low tens. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it was drivable.
It was drivable.
Yeah, that was the good thing about it. But today, a lot of that stuff has gotten away. Like where things really went downhill was the days that people started doing EFI on them, because you got the LSs came out without a distributor, so it eliminated the regular tuning guy, the guy that HEIs and carburetor. It eliminated that guy. It just drew a defining line right there. The 5-liter Ford was the first in the group, but it had a distributor, and you could literally just take the EFI off and throw it in the garbage and put a Performer RPM on it with a 650 double pumper and put a regular distributor in it.
And let it eat.
Yeah. And then the LS came out, and it was nothing the same. They kept the EFI. They spend tons of money on the intake manifold. Like, go pick an EFI intake manifold for an LS. You find the cheapest one that's going to make some power. Okay. And then go look at a carbureted equivalent. And I'll bet you it's half the price. That was where you cut the things out that were unimportant.
Well, my thing about it is Levi has a very unique car. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
Not many people's doing it. What he's doing with his car. And, everybody's got their own flavor of tea, so to speak. But, if the ultimate goal is to go fast, then definitely, man, you're way behind, ain't you?
I'm just catching up now.
Yeah.
Let's see. Nick the Van Man says the early Edelbrock heads for Chrysler small block were essentially stock X heads, just made out of.
Here's a fun fact. When I sold my 340, I had a set of J heads that I had ported, and we put a set of Edelbrock heads on it, and it was faster with my old J heads. So yes, he is exactly right. This is probably 01-ish, 02 maybe, something like that.
I'm, well, and so I don't know. The weight is the weight. When you pick the car, you pick your poison, right? In the Navy, they say this thing: you choose your rate, you choose your fate, and it's essentially like what you pick your job in the Navy, you choose how your fate is going to be in the Navy. It's the same way when you go racing. When you pick the body style of car that you're going to go with, you've pretty much chosen your fate.
Mm-hmm.
The A body stuff. Yeah, the Chevelles look nice from 70 to 72. They're whales. They're heavy
They
cars.
are whales.
Yeah, there's a reason why everybody goes with, Monza, Buick Skyhawk. Those things are freaking paperweights. They're like nothing compared to a big old heavy Chevelle. That's why guys like Novas, you know. Now, when you get it done on a big car, sometimes you see them every now and then where somebody's got an Impala or a Caprice or a Bel Air, and they're fast. And
Mm-hmm.
you got to give that guy kudos because, I mean, one, no one makes any parts for your car, and two, the that thing's a heavy bastard, and they're going fast, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Levi's saying the car fits an original Pro Stock class minus engine combination. Every car fits an original Pro Stock class. Like that was the whole idea, was to make it where anybody could do it. Let's see. Okay. Ron Ward saying my 71 Demon 440 727 323 gear ran 1250s at 108 on motor, 125 shot of nitrous, and that biatch ran 1133 at 122. Nitrous is king, but nobody fills bottles anymore. I remember way back in the day, I was big into nitrous stuff, and I was actually trying to find my own filling station, like buy my own, and they were about $600.
Yeah.
Right? They weren't that much money, and they used the air hammer. Like you got the air hammer with it, you got the stand with it, you got all the hoses and I think that was it.
Scales and everything.
Yeah, fittings. Yeah, it had a bunch of adapter fittings, and it was only like $500. And the way you used to fill a bottle back in the day is that like they used to use the air hammer and force the nitrous in. Okay.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to this guy that he used to service propane bottles, and he was like, it would just chill the bottle.
That's what we did 2 weeks ago for that grudge race. We had used all the bottle, threw it into cooler with a bag of ice, and turned the other bottle on with the bottle heater, just so we could
Transferred it immediately. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the way that I started doing them. And I'm like, man, I could totally do this for a living. But then what scared me away from it was when guys started using torches on the bottle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because now I'm the guy filling the bottle and it only gets 9 pounds in it cold. So what do? I got to break out the air hammer and you force the nitrous in there. But now you got a weak bottle because the guy's been using a torch on it and it blows up and kills the dude filling the bottle. And that's not what I wanted to be.
That's crazy.
So now I don't trust any nitrous bottles whatsoever. None. Let's see. We got some more. Hopefully there's some chats in here that bring us to something else.
Yeah.
All right. So Dakota's Timeout says, Dad said he bought a set of Edelbrock heads for a Ford FE he built in the early 2000s. He said they was exactly like the factory heads.
Pretty much it.
Right. But here's the thing, like, and it may not make a lot of sense because you've been in this world a lot. The Edelbrock heads has been in the world longer than you, right? In a world way back when all the heads were cast iron, that Edelbrock head was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
right? Even though it was a factory style head. I mean, they came out just you couldn't find they're not just a factory head. They're not like a 360 FE truck head. Okay. They're probably about like a good GT 390 head or Police Interceptor 406 head. That's probably what they're like. But
Yeah.
you couldn't find those heads back then. People hoarded them and you couldn't get any of that stuff. And when you did find stuff, you were happy that you had a 320 horse FE 390 head, you know. And when that Edelbrock aluminum head came out, and it's like, wow, $2,000 for a set of heads, and I can get rid of the junky stuff I got, where it's got strip bolt holes and freaking, you know, it's got 900 helicoils and everything. Yeah, I can get rid of that, and I can get myself a nice set of Edelbrocks. And that's what
Yep.
people did, you know, and it was cool for the regular guy that just wanted to put together something that he could never find the parts for. Yeah, and then the other thing is they weighed about 150 pounds less than the factory stuff. So, okay, there you go. And Nick Scavo, I haven't thought of that guy in a long time. Um, I want to say he was fastest Streetcar America shootout guy, right? I'm pretty certain he was. Okay. Oh man. Fan brace mod repeat. We used to use an old Coke machine to get the bottle cold. Yeah. Science did the rest. Yeah. And that was the
Exactly
amazing
right.
thing. The first time I saw that, I was like, why haven't I been doing this my whole life? You know, because I was always air hammering them. And then you get the bottle back, it's all hot, right? From forcing that liquid in there. But the only time I've ever seen a 10-pound nitrous bottle hold 11 pounds of not liquid nitrous was when you freeze it and then go fill it with a hot bottle. And that works so good in the South because you would freeze them, throw them in a cooler full of ice, take them to the nitrous shop, and it's like 146,000 degrees plus the 100% humidity. And then it will literally just transfer to your bottle so fast you can watch the sweat run down the side of the bottle,
Yep.
right? Oh, did talk to Bad Attitude C10 about bad bottles, huh? He must have got a bad bottle, huh? Embrace Mine Repeat says the Effie Edelbrock head started as a 428 Cobra Jet Police Interceptor spec. Okay, there you go. With a
Yeah.
lot of meat to port. So, uh, 4,000-pound car divided by 500 horsepower with a 3,000-pound car with 250 horsepower being competitive against it. I don't, to tell you the truth, and that's you guys are getting way off the topic of a $5,000 claimer class, right?
Well, we got them started down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Ron Ward says, have you priced machine work lately? I have. A set of exhaust valve seats and guides on all 16 valves installed is more expensive than a set of Edelbrock aluminum heads complete. Oh, I can't see that being the case. Valve seats and guides on all 16 valves. I did valve guides. I haven't done seats and guides, but I had $800 in a set of Buick heads that I thought was pretty dang expensive. But the Edelbrock Buick heads are like $3,200 or something.
Yeah.
But most of the stuff that I work on, nobody makes anything for them, so the price is just the price. Okay. Let's see. Nick DeVan Man says, "You're completely right. Always get a quote. I've learned with new pricing many times. I could have new good stuff instead of patching my old heavy junk." That's how I felt about. I had to have a crank turn on a 351 one time, 351 Windsor, and I was gonna have the crank turn, the rods resized. The rod resizing cost was more than just buying a set of Eagle rods or scat rods. I think I bought a set of scat rods that were cap screw with ARP bolts in them for cheaper,
Yeah.
right? And then the crank was $130 less to have it turned, and I could have got a 393 crank from Scat. So I ordered the Scat crank and got the Scat rods, and then I just bought a set of 302 pistons and built myself a 393.
The poor man 393. I love it. That's
Yeah.
what we named Casper.
So Nick the Van Man says, "Hey Dallas, local in Nashville, a pair of V8 heads will run $500 to $600 for basic hot tank valve job and mill, and they always find bad guys valves." So I I don't know if I told him about how I do heads, but like every head that I end up finding that's junk, like cracked or damaged or whatever, I take the valves out and I throw them in a bucket and I clean them all up. And what I do is when I get another set of heads in, say it's like another 455 Buick, I'll pull the valves out of it. And usually they eat the guides, the big blocks. Well, actually, any of the Buicks, they eat the guides pretty good. And I'll go through and I'll find valves that have that are thicker on the stem that have less wear, right? And it'll tighten them up instead of redoing all the guides. So I'll put the all new valves and I'll lap them in, and then I'll dress the valves with a file on the top, and that way they're all the correct height. But I do them so cheap. Sold that aluminum 215. Oh, okay. Well, thanks, Disney. I appreciate you thinking of me, but I just didn't have room for it. I have a garage packed full of crap right now. Okay, Buick Smith. Tech question. Will advancing the timing always increase engine temp? No.
In fact, it's the opposite until you get in detonation. You run too little of time and it'll make temperature go up.
Yeah, and when you get it way too far advanced, it'll run hot.
Yeah.
But like I've seen guys running running vacuum advanced to straight vacuum at an idle, so it'll have 43 degrees of timing at idle, and then dialing the carburetor way back to deal with it. They'll run hot, but there is a certain point. Generally, okay, the more time you give it, the more efficient the engine generally is until you press the point of where the fuel is detonating before the spark.
Yeah.
And that's when things get bad. And generally, it's a lot of it's air fuel ratio mixture too. The more timing you give it, the slower you would want the burn rate on the fuel, right? And to do that, you add more air, less fuel. And what you find is most guys will have too much fuel for the burn rate and too much timing. And that will cause them to run hot too. So that'll make them detonate as well. Let's see. Okay, Buick Smith says, tech question, will advance in time. Oh, okay, we just read that. So he's put it up twice. Oh, Levi's backyard performance. People like seeing new parts are bad, and I understand being oblivious consumer is bad, but when price comparisons come into play, a couple saves can cost thousands later, sometimes not always. That's connecting rod, my connecting rod philosophy. Buy good connecting rods. If it's going to be something that's hot that you're going to be beating on and make some power, buy good rods. Don't use that factory stuff. And Levi is one of the, he's one of our LS guys here. They have a powdered metal rod. And if you don't know what a powdered metal rod is, I'm going to give you some metallurgy 101 here. Okay. Imagine going over to your grinder and grinding something, steel or iron or whatever you want to call it, into a pile underneath that. And you take that pile of grinding and you squeeze and press that into a connecting rod, kind of like particle board on your roof. Okay. Same kind of philosophy. And you press that together with so much heat and pressure that it makes a rod. And then you machine that. That's a powdered metal rod. And those things didn't start happening until like the late 90s. The rods you get before that, and for you LS folks, you have no other choice except for a set of aftermarket rods. Us old schoolers, we can go get a good set of rods. You just find something out of something earlier. Nobody made a rod. Henry Ford would have never let Ford Motor Company make a rod out of grindings.
You know what's crazy? They've come a long way with that, Dallas. The original mod motors, they came out with them in 91.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then, but like you take a Coyote rod, a Gen 3 Coyote rod today, it's still powdered metal. And people are making 1,100 horsepower at the rear tires with those rods.
Oh, wow.
No failure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they have come a long way because they used to kick
Come a
them out
long way.
all the time. They used to kick them out. The thing that I've seen that I like, that's the newest technology I'm familiar with, is they make a rod that's called a cracked powdered metal rod. So they make a powdered metal rod, and instead of cutting the cap off,
It just cracked off.
they crack it, and then it's got cap screw bolts, but they fit perfectly, right? There's no misalignment or there's no extra machining process involved. It actually just fits on there perfectly. So it was perfectly round because it's been drilled one time.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty ingenious. But
Even the late model, like Gen 4 LS rod stuff can make a ton of power. The metallurgy's come a long ways. I remember back when I first started doing mod motor stuff, if you started making more than 450 to 500 at the tire with the factory powdered metal rod, you were on borrowed time.
Yeah, powdered metal was that's not what anybody wanted to use back in the 90s, early 2000s. They're not, I guess, they're probably fine for a stock engine.
Yeah.
When you start throwing power at them, like power adders at them, man, they become the serious weak link.
Just a little bit of detonation and you find the weak spot.
Just like, I'll give you an example. The one before the powdered metal rod was the hypereutectic piston. The hypereutectic piston was the best thing since sliced bread. You go out, you drive it around, it wouldn't rattle, wouldn't make a bunch of noise. It was much stronger than a cast piston, and you could detonate, and they weren't too bad. And then somebody found out that if you detonate on them too long, they just explode. They don't burn a hole in them or crack and lose a ringland like a cast piston does. They virtually shatter. And then you clean out your whole block, and your motor's now junk, because the cast piston, when they would fail, they'd break the ringland off or the top of the piston, and the rest of the piston generally would stay up in there and keep going. Right? It might score up the cylinder wall a little bit, but it would still keep the rod centered and keep it from becoming a freaking battle axe inside that motor.
Right.
Hypereutectic was not the case. They'd end up in the pan in about 2,000 pieces.
Yeah.
And that thing would clean out the block.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nick's talking about the old budget 393 stuff. Back in our day, it was take a 400 crank, machine it down.
The mains.
Yeah. And then use a 351 rod with a 302 piston. Because the 400 has a 3.85 stroke. 393.
Yeah, and it uses the stock 351 Windsor rod with a 302 piston. They have the same wrist pin size, so it's literally just like if you get the later 351 Windsor rod, the later style with the full
Yeah.
floating wrist pin, and then
Good
you
to
get
go.
the later style full floating wrist pin piston, you can put them together at home for nothing, and the pistons cost like what, $180 for a set of pistons.
Yeah. Man, we're over 2 hours already. I see people
Oh
saying
man,
good night.
yeah. Well, I didn't even. This one flew by. I guess falling in love and thinking about the heyday of pro stock and all that just
Our
made
rabbit
me.
hole of $5,000 challenge. Oh yeah.
Oh, dude, yeah, I could chat about all that stuff all night. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, I want to thank Andy for coming on.
Well,
It's
thanks for
been a
having
while
me.
since we had you on here. Yeah,
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
yeah. I want to. Hopefully, Dylan Levi is not too butthurt about the, getting picked on, asking that question, getting an honest answer from me. I'm always going to tell you the truth. But yes, you can have a $5,000 claim or car using that car. You could. You just need to find the right combo with the right budget.
Yeah.
And I want to thank everybody, those that sent us super chats.
Yes.
So
Keeping the lights on.
yeah, definitely keeping the lights on. And here we're going to have some new Mr. Rogers Neighborhood content coming soon. Once I kind of just get a few things wrapped up here, and we'll be on to the What If 300. I have everything I need. So
There you go.
yeah, let's see what kind of power it makes. So I guess we'll see you cats next Wednesday. So thanks for stopping by.
See y'all.